Hello to everyone who is watching this recorded.
So we're continuing from last class, I guess really the last two classes because the Haggadah is consecutive. And so last time we got started on the third paragraph and really the kind of the real beginning. I know we said Halach Ani was the beginning. It's really an introduction. Manishtana was the beginning. But this is actually where the story is really going to begin. And so yesterday we spoke about this part of the Haggadah of Vadim Hayinu, we were slaves. We discussed the idea of why the Haggadah needs to mention that we're going from a place of slavery. Why do we need to mention the negativity in our story? We should just mention all the good stuff, just like all the other historians do. And of course, for more information on that, check out class number 2. But today I wanted to kind of move forward through this paragraph of Vadim Hayinu, that we were slaves. And right, one of the things that's really fascinating it says right, Vadim Hayinu, we were slaves, L'Pharaoh b'Mitzrayim, to Pharaoh in Egypt. V'yotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham biyad chazaka uvizroya netuya. That God took us out from there with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm. And so this is language which shows up very, very often in the Haggadah, in the Haggadah, but also just in general about Passover and about the exodus from Egypt, that God took us with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. So the question is, what exactly does that mean? Of course, we don't believe in an anthropomorphic God in this religion. We don't believe that God actually has a hand. We don't believe that God actually has an arm. So what are we supposed to glean from this? What's the lesson that we're trying to pick up here? So the idea is basically like this. There's two main aspects and characteristics of what was going on in Egypt when God needed to take the Jews out from Egypt. So number one is, if you want to affect the world, you need to do it in a way of strength. There needs to be strength behind what you're doing. If you want to make a difference, there needs to be that big punch, that aspect, which it's I have power, I have energy, I have the capacity to actually make a difference. I can take that one big punch and knock them out. That's our first aspect. And so the idea of a yad chazaka is that God came in and he had the makot, the plagues, and he did them with power, with strength. So too in our lives, when we want to go make a difference, when we want to go do something, it requires initial strength. But the problem is, so that's the first aspect. The second aspect of uvzroa netuya, an outstretched arm, is it's not, we can't just look at the world in strong punches. We also need to look at the world if we want to accomplish something, if we want to make a difference, it needs to come with some sort of continuation of that process. So there's a second part of pain that you can affect somebody with, and that is small pain, which happens again and again and again and again. And if you were in my house for the last day, what you heard was just nonstop carbon monoxide and smoke alarms beeping, and it'll drive anyone insane. And so there's a second aspect of making making a difference, of making a change, of trying to overcome a challenge, which is that there's an aspect of it which is, even if it's a small impact, even if it's not going to affect you in a very strong way, if it's consistent and it continues throughout time, so then it actually has the ability to exist. In other words, if God came in and all he did was he just sucker punched the Egyptians, right? He came in with plague number 1, plague number 2, plague number 3, so on and so forth. And it was just one moment. So you get knocked down, right? You fall down, you get back up. You just come back. But if there's a continuation of the process, then you consistently feel it again and again and again. But I'll put it this way. There are times in our lives where, okay, you get that first hit, and then if the difficulty that you have or the power that you have to exert is very minimal, so it's not going to affect you significantly. In other words, if you're sleeping in bed and you hear the smoke alarm going off, right, that's not enough of a botherance to actually get you out of bed a lot of times. That's not actually going to lead you to go and like turn it off. Like maybe once you finally have enough energy, you'll go and turn it off. So it's this idea that there's also pain but exists for a long time. What God did for the Jews in Egypt with a yad chazaka, with a strong punch, uvizroy natuya, and an outstretched arm, is he not only made it strong, but it existed for a long time. And so it was like getting knocked out by Mike Tyson again and again and again and again, right? And so what ends up happening is that the energy and power with which God brings the Jews out of Egypt is a strong, impassioned, consistent energy. And so too for us, when we're going through life, we go through our challenges, or we go through our own Mitzrayim, our own Egypt in our lives. So we oftentimes have this idea that either I need to be very strong and overcome difficulty, and I need to be consistent, but there's always going to be a confluence of the two. We need to say, I need to be strong and I need to be consistent in my strength. Questions? Hi, Abe.
So where do you get from Zora Natuya that it's consistent or repetitive?
Yeah, very good. So the idea is an arm is something which extends. An arm is something which goes out from your body. It's Natuya means like spread out. So the idea is it's not just one strong yad, which is like the punch, but it's actually a full extension of the arm, which is a representation of that time. It's not just that in other words, you can come if you want to hit somebody. God forbid we shouldn't hit people, but let's say in a situation where you're defending yourself, maybe, right? So you have that one punch, and then that's all you have from the energy. But if you can consistently bring out from that extension more and more energy, so that's going to bring a harder and harder punch. Okay, so that's the idea of a yad chazaka through natuya. The Haggadah continues, and we'll just do a very quick idea and then move to the next part, or the next. We'll just stop. We'll just go for it. If God didn't take our forefathers out from Egypt, so we and our children and our children's children would all be slaves in Egypt. So I think there's two big questions a person can have on this. I don't want to. Actually, let's go. We'll go for it. We'll spend a little bit of time. So, what does that mean? If God didn't take our forefathers out of Egypt, so we would just have been like stuck there. Like, why couldn't He just take the next generation out, or the generation after that, right? Like, why couldn't God just take, like, if we were still in Egypt, God forbid, like, why couldn't He just take us out? So the idea is, it's not that the point is not that the generations following would have never been taken out, but the idea is, what was the cause of our exodus from Egypt? There's an important idea. It waxes a bit philosophical, so we have to put on our philosophical thinking caps here, or as Rabbi Fox likes to say very often, our spiritual glasses. But I'm much more philosophical than spiritual, so we'll stick in the philosophical realm over here. And the idea is not that the generations wouldn't have been taken out, but if the cause of our being taken out, that is to say, God didn't take us out, we never would have left. Because the idea is that there's what's called mass or matter in the world. Probably matter is a better word. And then there's energy in the world. And what you have is that there's something which is called physicality and something which is called spirituality. There's something which is called potential, and then there's called actualization of that potential. So if you want to, for example, if you want to burn a log, a piece of wood, so you have the fire, you have the wood, and that's the physicality, that's the potential, and you go and you light a match, and then it turns into fire. Now what we say is that that's being turned into energy, but the truth of the matter is, like, energy is not something which is very we can measure it insofar as we assign a description to it or a definition to it, but the actual existence of energy in the world is something which is beyond our grasp, something we can't actually connect to, right? I tried to find what is called, like, what is like a picture of energy, and this is the best I could get. And the idea not being that, like, the idea being very simply, you can't actually describe energy. You might get something like a a bolt of lightning. But again, what you're seeing is not the energy itself. You're just seeing an expression of that energy. And so what we oftentimes deal with is that there are these ideas which exist in the world which are beyond, which give the power and the ability for something else to function, but we don't actually know what that thing is. That's what we call, in essence, spirituality. That's in essence what we call God. God is the ultimate idea of expression, the ultimate idea of cause in the world. And so what we're aiming for here is not that it's not like anyone would, we wouldn't have been able to leave, our children wouldn't have been able to leave. Like, that's totally fine. The time doesn't matter as much. What we have to look at is the fact that the capacity for an exodus to Egypt, exodus from Egypt to exist, is something which exists because there was an energy that was underlying it. In our lives, we have a similar kind of thing. A lot of times, there's a physical situation that we exist in, or our own personal holdups and things like that. The fact that our heart beats, even, right? It's very hard to point out what the actual cause and energy of that is. But what we recognize is when we tap into something which is more, again, spiritual, or more moving into that philosophical realm, we recognize that there's an energy, a life that we can imbue ourselves with. That's, again, this idea that we're going for in Passover. Okay, I know it's a little bit philosophical, so I just want to make sure that we're like we're on the same page here. Everyone good? Cool. So just again, ensure the idea, God gave the energy. If God never gave the energy to the Jewish people to leave, we never would have had that. And so too, we have to think about that in our ability to tap into what gets us out of bed in the morning. What, by the way, during all this ridiculousness that we're existing right now in the world, like what gives us that sense of life, that sense of passion. We have to recognize that comes from somewhere that is beyond us. We have to figure out how to tap into that. Okay. Continues. Vafilu kulanu chachamim, kulanu nevonim, kulanu zikanim. Even if we were all wise people, we were all another kind of wise people, we were all old people, and we all knew the Torah, there's still a mitzvah aleinu l'saper b'yetzias Mitzrayim. Still a mitzvah to tell over the story of the Exodus from Egypt. So, of course, I hope our question is, what are these four descriptors? If we were all chachamim, we all had one type of wisdom. We all nevonim, we all had another kind of wisdom. We all were old. Okay, like old, like fine. And we all knew the Torah, then we would still have a mitzvah. So the first question is, what are these four things? And the second thing is, what does it have to do with telling over the story of Egypt? So if I know the story, maybe I shouldn't have to tell it over, right? Abe's been like going to Jewish day school for a long time. So he's like read the Passover story like every year for a long, long time. Like he knows it. Like, why does he have to read it again? And he's very smart, right? He's a very smart person. Aviv, also very smart person, right? We got a lot of brilliant people over here. And yeah, like really smart, like the smartest people you've ever met, yet they still have a mitzvah to tell over the story of Egypt. So let's try to figure out why is that what's going on. So the first idea is we have something called chachma, and that is intellectual, unconnected knowledge. So what you have in life is a bunch of dots, a bunch of pieces of information, factoids, things here, things there. I have this information and that information. And so the first idea is, even if we had entire chachma, if you knew all of the facts about the Passover story, you knew that there were 10 plagues, you knew that there were Jews, well, they weren't technically Jews quite yet, but they were Hebrews, I guess is what we call them, right? They were tribes of, they were of the tribes of Jacob. And we knew that there were 70 of them went down to Egypt, and there was a pharaoh, and we knew all of this information. So we still wouldn't have the capacity to put it all together. And so we say, even if we were all wise, wouldn't be enough. But then there's a second type of knowledge, which is called bina, which is the ability to connect the dots. And so even if we had the ability not only to look at all the individuals, Abe loves this one, right? Even if we had the ability to connect all of those individual aspects together, and we could see how the story existed, and we could tap into it emotionally, right? Bina is that aspect of I build on different pieces of knowledge and I connect it. It's always connected to the idea of a heart because it's a more emotional connection to knowledge. So even if we had all of that, that we were able to realize that this is Bob the Builder, right? And the idea is, of course, that by the way, Chachma is all the dots. Bina is when you start putting together, you realize you have a picture there. You actually have the story of Passover, right? You don't just have a bunch of factoids and pieces of information. And even if we were all old people, which means we were wise in our years, we'd experienced this. We'd seen the Passover Seder. We'd experienced how life fits together. I have a deeper, more broad conception of knowledge and wisdom in the world. So even if you had all three of those things, that you understood knowledge from an intellectual standpoint, you understood knowledge from a connective standpoint, you understood knowledge from a life experience standpoint, and you'd been experiencing this years and years and years and years, and you knew the Torah, you guys are probably curious, like, what does this have to do with Torah, right? Like, it's a little interesting. So there's another type of knowledge even beyond that, which is knowledge that you rely on another person for. So when you go into your classes, for example, right, you go in and you say, of course, there's certain type of knowledge and I learn facts. I then have to connect that knowledge. I write an essay, right? And then I have to go do maybe a lab report, or I have to go put it into a presentation. I have to turn it into actualized knowledge. But then there's another aspect of knowledge, which is even though I don't know this knowledge, I know there's knowledge there. And I'm relying on the person who's teaching all this to me to know that there's even more beyond that. And I'm relying on the fact that his knowledge, which I don't even know yet, is actually buttressing and giving rise to all the knowledge that I know. And that's the Torah in the world. That even beyond the things that you personally understand, beyond the things that you emotionally understand, beyond the things that you experientially understand, there's still going to be, even if you knew that you believed and you relied and you connected to the fact that there's wisdom which is even greater than you, that is even beyond you, we would still need to tell over the story of leaving Egypt. And the question is why? The question is ultimately why? So, answers like this. We still have a mitzvah. We still would have a mitzvah to tell over the story of Egypt. Now, on the first class, it's only on class 3, so I expect you to remember at least most of what we talked about before, if not everything, right? But in the first class, we explained what the word Haggadah means. But the word Haggadah, it means to tell over in a story in a way that elicits questions and interest. Mitzvah of the Haggadah, it's from the Torah. It says Haggadah talabincha. You have to tell it over to your son in a way that elicits questions. But the mitzvah, we oftentimes call it Sipor Yetzias Mitzrayim, the telling over of the story of leaving Egypt. And so the question is, what's the difference between Sipor Yetzias Mitzrayim, the language of Sipor, of Sefer, Vayisaper, and the language of Haggadah, Lahagid? And the answer is that what a Sefer is supposed to do is it's supposed to tell something over in a dramatic way. What the word Vayisaper means is to tell over in a dramatic way. To not only elicit questions, but to bring a person emotionally and in a reality to the situation, to allow them to be able to see that this is really a dramatic experience and we want to connect to it, right? That I have no idea why that's happening right now. Actually, I do know why that's happening. It's actually a little bit funny. Okay. Not sure why that's, okay. What can you do? See, now it's dramatic. Now everybody's paying attention. So the idea, very, very, very simply put, is you have to tell over the story in a way that's dramatic, in a way people connect to. Because at the end of the day, the mitzvah is not to do this so that we all know ourselves. And even if we all were wise and we were bright and we knew everything that we needed to know, and we were connected, and like you could recite the Haggadah straight away. The whole point of leaving Egypt is to show that there's greatness in the world, that there's this amazing story that occurred, and to relive it and to experience it and to show the world, whoa, look at this miracle that occurred. And the way that happens is by telling over the story. when the Jewish people got the Torah, so Moshe comes down back from Mount Sinai, and the first time, and his father-in-law Yisro comes to him, and it says Vayesaper Moshe. Moshe told it over in a story form, because when you're going out and telling it to other people, when you're telling it to the world, when you're expressing the ideas, you're not just telling them like what happened. You're not just getting them emotionally involved, but you're bringing the idea out to revelation, to reality. And so our goal and our mission, as we focus on this Passover Seder, is that we recognize that there's something beyond wisdom that we're aiming for here. There's something called experience. There's something called revelation. And as we aim for those ideas, to express those, not only to know those ideas, but to express them in the world, right? Not only to know that I should be an ethical and moral person, but to express those ideas in the world. Those are the key aspects of the story. That's why we have to tell it over. We have to do it in a way that elicits an emotional response. Questions? Okay. And finally, we'll just finish up here. I know this is a little bit shorter than normal, but it's Erev Shabbos, so everybody must be super busy getting ready for the Shabbos preparations. Make sure to send a picture of you getting your Shabbos preparations already with the hashtag Thank God It's Shabbos. I'm told I'm supposed to tell people that. Abe thinks this is funny. Did you get the text, Abe? No? Ask Jesse about it.
Okay, I'll ask him.
Yeah. Okay. So the last part here, just in the paragraph, and anyone who increases in telling over the story of the exodus of Egypt, so that's considered praiseworthy. And this is just an interesting introduction, because the next section is the famous, most confusing probably part of the entire Haggadah, which is the story about Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, who are like sitting and they're just having the Passover Seder. And it's like all of a sudden we're in Bnei Brak and like something strange is happening and like everyone's just having their Seder. And of course, this is an introduction to that idea, that the idea is not to have a super long Seder, but the idea is to continually to be adding on meaning and depth and ideas and wisdom and experience into your Seder. And so what you'll see is that the highest level of doing that is you get so engrossed and so involved that you end up spending all night doing it. So of course, that's not necessarily what we're aiming for. We should make sure that we're sensitive to our hosts and our families and the other people of the Seder, not to go any longer than they want to go necessarily. Although I do have an interesting story to share with you guys next time about that. But of course, there's an idea that if we're doing this properly, we're going to want to add, we're going to want to share beautiful ideas and beautiful experiences with our families, and one day with our children. That's what we're aiming for. That's what we're going for. So we'll pause there. We'll pick up next time with this story. And I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron. Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, guys.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.